Some Dutchmen say, "Why are you going? You're going to Trump."
In international visitors to the U.S., down at least 14% from a year ago.
Ed Bastian's warning comes as foreign visitors are canceling trips to the U.S., down nearly 12% in March compared to a year ago.
The United States is facing a staggering economic blow as international tourism collapses. Analysts warn that the country could lose nearly $100 billion in GDP, not from war or pandemic, but from something more avoidable: tourists choosing not to come. Nowhere is the crisis clearer than along the US-Canada border. In just 1 month, the number of Canadians traveling to the US dropped by 70%. That's 500,000 fewer people crossing the border by air and by road. For many small towns that depend on those visitors, the decline is devastating. Shops are closing, hotels are empty, local economies are unraveling. But this isn't just about travel preferences. What's unfolding is an international tourism boycott, and it didn't begin with the tourists. It began with the tone and policies coming out of Washington. One of the most striking examples of this tourism collapse can be seen in Point Roberts, Washington, a tiny U.S. exclave that borders British Columbia, Canada. The town's economy has long depended on Canadian visitors, who frequently cross the border for groceries, gas vacations, Wookiee gangs, and weekend getaways. But now, it's a ghost town. Shops are closing, restaurants are empty. Locals describe a sudden dramatic drop in cross-border traffic. Residents who spoke to media outlets, including dual citizens, say it plainly: policies and rhetoric from the Trump administration, especially around tariffs and nationalism, have offended Canadians and driven them away. Longtime visitors no longer feel welcome, and many are choosing to spend their time and money elsewhere. This isn't just a minor dip in business, it's an economic gut punch for towns that rely almost entirely on international tourism. The fallout goes beyond missed revenue. It threatens livelihoods, home values, and the long-term survival of entire communities that once thrived on peaceful, friendly border exchange. The drop in international tourism to the United States isn't isolated. It's global, and it's accelerating in ways that should concern not only business owners, but policymakers and diplomats alike. Across nearly every region: Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, South America, Africa, and Australia, the number of travelers visiting the U.S. has declined significantly. In many cases, this downturn has reached double-digit percentages, representing a sharp and sustained reversal from the trends of past decades when the U.S. consistently ranked as one of the most visited countries in the world. What makes this shift so concerning is not just the scale of the decline, but its consistency across regions and travel methods. It's not limited to tourists from one particular area, nor to temporary disruptions such as pandemic-related restrictions. Instead, the trend spans continents and continues even as global travel elsewhere begins to rebound. In fact, in many regions, other countries are seeing growth in tourism, while the United States continues to lose ground, a strong indication that the problem is specific to America's perception and policies, rather than external conditions like global inflation or airline shortages. The most severe and measurable impact is in the relationship with Canada, historically one of the United States' most reliable and friendly tourism partners. In just 1 month, approximately 500,000 fewer Canadian travelers entered the U.S., marking a 70% year-over-year decline. That is a stunning drop for a country with such close geographic, cultural, and economic ties. Importantly, this collapse isn't confined to international flights. Land border crossings have also seen major reductions, affecting towns and cities that depend on steady flows of cross-border commerce, leisure travel, and seasonal visitors. To put this into perspective, Canada is not only geographically close, but also politically aligned and economically integrated with the United States through trade agreements like USMCA. For Canadian tourism to drop this sharply suggests more than just changes in airfare or vacation trends. It suggests a deep emotional and psychological shift in how people view the United States. Simply put, what used to feel familiar and friendly now feels uncertain, unwelcoming, or even hostile to some. This shift reflects a larger issue: the erosion of the United States' soft power, the ability to attract and influence through cultural appeal values and global goodwill. Travel, after all, is about more than just logistics or attraction. People go places where they feel safe, welcomed, and respected. When a country loses that sense of openness and comfort, travelers take their business elsewhere, often without a second thought. In surveys and anecdotal reports, many foreign visitors now describe the United States as less stable, more polarized, and more difficult to enter both practically and ideologically. Stories of lengthy visa waits, aggressive immigration enforcement, and xenophobic rhetoric make headlines across the world. And while these may not represent every American's values or every region of the country, they shape the narrative abroad, a narrative that is pushing people to explore other destinations where they feel more at ease. In economic terms, the consequences are already being felt in sectors like hospitality, retail, transportation, and entertainment. But in diplomatic and cultural terms, the costs may be even steeper. When fewer people travel to a country, they're also less likely to engage with its culture, build relationships, or carry back positive experiences. Tourism in this way acts as a powerful form of grassroots diplomacy, and America is losing that influence one unbooked trip at a time. The collapse in international tourism to the United States didn't happen in a vacuum. It's the direct result of a sharp shift in tone and policy, particularly during Donald Trump's presidency. One of the most impactful drivers has been his administration's aggressive tariff policies, which affected long-standing trade relationships with allies such as Canada, Mexico, and the European Union. While framed as America's first economic protectionism, these tariffs strained diplomatic ties and created the perception that the United States was no longer interested in collaboration but confrontation. This hardline stance wasn't limited to economic issues. Trump's frequent anti-immigration rhetoric, threats of border closures, and public disparagement of other nations, including long-standing allies, further deepened the divide. For international travelers, the message was clear: they were no longer as welcome as before. Tourists, unlike policymakers, don't need diplomatic resolutions to make decisions, they simply choose to go somewhere else. The diplomatic tension with Canada in particular left a lasting mark.
The people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty.
Trump's public insults aimed at Canadian leadership and disputes over trade, especially dairy and steel, sparked backlash across Canadian media and public opinion. For many Canadians, a trip to the U.S. no longer felt like a casual or friendly journey. It became a political and ethical choice. The steep 70% drop in Canadian visitors in a single month is not just a statistic. It's a referendum on how political tone can influence personal behavior across borders. This moment reveals something deeper. Tourism isn't just about economics or leisure. It's also about perception, trust, and relationship building between nations. And when those relationships fracture, the effects ripple far beyond policy rooms. They hit local businesses, jobs, and entire communities on the ground. The decline in international tourism to the United States isn't simply the byproduct of fluctuating markets or pandemic-era travel hesitation. It is the result of a strategic, prolonged shift in national messaging that began during the Trump administration and echoed far beyond political rallies. At the center of this messaging was the mantra, "America First." While it resonated with certain domestic audiences abroad, it was widely perceived as a declaration that foreigners were no longer welcome, not in trade, not in policy, and not in person. This shift in tone had real-world consequences. To millions of people across the globe, travel is not just about sightseeing. It's a matter of cultural exchange, business exploration, and personal comfort. When the U.S. government actively embraced isolationist rhetoric paired with hardline immigration policies, aggressive trade wars, and public criticism of longtime allies, the image of America transformed. What was once viewed as a dynamic, open society became increasingly associated with suspicion, hostility, and political unpredictability. The effects of this were not limited to tourism alone. The same atmosphere that discouraged vacationers also began to alienate international students, entrepreneurs, global investors, and foreign companies. Business delegations began to pull back. Cross-border partnerships slowed, and in many cases, foreign direct investment shifted toward more politically stable or diplomatically neutral markets. In essence, the U.S. wasn't just losing visitors, it was losing trust. For the tourism and service sectors, the repercussions have been particularly painful. These industries thrive on consistent foot traffic, positive perception, and a sense of global interconnectedness. But as the political climate cooled international enthusiasm, these sectors were hit hard. Hotels reported rising vacancy rates in key international markets. Tour operators cited dwindling interest from abroad. Small towns and major cities alike saw sales declines in restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues that once flourished from overseas traffic. By 2025, analysts, including those at Goldman Sachs, began projecting that the cumulative effect of declining international tourism could result in as much as $100 billion in lost GDP. These are not abstract numbers. They reflect jobs not created, wages not paid, and communities left behind. And the alarming part is that none of this happened by accident. It was the natural consequence of a deliberate political posture that deprioritized global goodwill in favor of domestic posturing. In short, this wasn't a policy oversight or diplomatic blunder, it was a systemic withdrawal from the international community packaged as populist strength. But for the towns that depended on foreign visitors and the economy that benefited from global engagement, the price has been enormous. The economic losses from declining international tourism are substantial, but the damage to the United States' reputation may be even more costly and far longer lasting. For much of the 20th and early 21st centuries, America was considered a cultural beacon and one of the world's most aspirational travel destinations. Whether people came for its cities, its national parks, its universities, or its promise of freedom and opportunity, the U.S. was widely seen as open, vibrant, and welcoming. That perception is now in serious decline. As international travelers cancel trips and turn to alternative destinations, it's clear the issue goes far beyond economics. What the United States is facing is an erosion of what experts call its nation brand, a country's global reputation, not just as a place to visit, but as a place to trust, respect, and engage with. The way a country is perceived impacts everything from tourism and trade to diplomacy and soft power. And right now, the United States is losing ground in that intangible but critical category. Visitors from Canada, Europe, and beyond are not simply avoiding the U.S. because of travel restrictions or cost, they're avoiding it because it no longer feels as friendly, as safe, or as globally minded. In an increasingly connected world where reputation spreads faster than ever through media, social platforms, and shared experiences, perception is reality. If people feel unwelcome, they will go elsewhere, and they are. This isn't just a challenge for the tourism industry, it's a crisis for American identity on the global stage. Once seen as a cultural melting pot and a champion of democracy, the U.S. is increasingly portrayed as politically unstable, socially divided, and diplomatically unpredictable. The imagery of border walls, immigration bans, and adversarial rhetoric has replaced that of opportunity and openness in the minds of many would-be visitors. The implications are profound. When a country's image sours, so does its influence. Fewer people travel to learn English in American classrooms. Fewer artists, scholars, and scientists come to collaborate. Fewer business leaders view the U.S. as a reliable partner. And fewer young people around the world grow up admiring America as a symbol of hope or innovation. In that sense, what's at stake isn't just revenue, it's global relevance. And repairing that may take far longer than rebuilding hotel occupancy rates. It will require a deliberate, sustained effort to restore trust, reestablish goodwill, and redefine what the United States stands for in the eyes of the world.